For healing to occur, it's important to start with the end in mind. There is a part of you that's never been hurt, harmed, or broken. In stage 1 is where you experience shock, disbelief from the betrayal and the losses. It's difficult to fathom that we could ever overcome what's happened. So I just want to validate the reality of this, and that this is not something that you can just get over. This is something we must process and integrate. It takes time to come to terms with. So in these masterclasses, these modules, I want to offer you some invaluable pointers and insights that could help you move through these stages of healing, so you don't remain stuck, confused and searching for answers for any longer than is necessary. It's been a while since I published a video, and I honestly wondered whether I'll return to this subject at all. It's been an interesting time for me personally, discerning what's in alignment and what no longer is. I guess it's just a reflection of where I'm at in my personal life regarding this subject. What's not in alignment is discussing the details of our personal trauma and participating in the blame game of ourselves or others. It's an extremely disempowering state, kind of like painfully picking at wounds that are trying to heal. And some people will feel relief when they hear me say this. And for some people, it will trigger defensiveness. And that's okay. I offer no judgment because it's just a reflection of where we are. I hope you feel called to focus your energy and attention on what the solutions are, and you're ready to let go of focusing on the problem, simply because it's too heavy and it's not where healing lies. And maybe consider this first video as a sample of what I will be teaching in the masterclasses. What I refer to as the first stage is where we discover what the problem is. And we have a desperate need to understand all the intricacies of what the problem is, which is the narcissist and narcissism itself. And I notice that a lot of people get stuck in this stage for way too long, not even recognizing that it is a stage that you're meant to move through. I noticed that over the years of me teaching this subject, researching it, and even in personal mentoring sessions, what became really apparent is that the majority of people really get stuck at a particular stage. And I can honestly relate to having this experience as well. We become so engrossed in this subject with not enough instruction and vision of what we actually want to move toward and how to actually get there to a better feeling place about yourself and about your life. This is self-motivated and self-paced. Nobody can drag you kicking and screaming. And believe me, nobody cares, least of all the narcissist, if you're hurting for a decade or two and can't move on with your life. And I don't mean to come across as abrasive, but I want to really emphasize that you don't dedicate your entire life to this, because you are meant to be happy. You are meant to feel safe and know that you are loved. So this time that I've been away from YouTube, I've been in the process of creating a masterclass, which is a series of audios and videos, which will be specific lessons, each focused on a particular area that we often get stuck on. I offer you insights on how to identify where you are at on this journey, and also insights of how to move through it. But most of all, it's like a roadmap of what's next, what your goal needs to be. So it's basically a guide to healing. And this is for anyone who's tired of being stuck, who's willing to take self-responsibility, who wants to gain a higher perspective of where they're at and where they're headed. So I just want to make a brief video about the stages of healing that we go through to help you identify and move through certain areas that you may still be stuck in. So there are numerous stages we go through, from the initial shock of finally getting the validation that we need, that we're not crazy, to the next stage of healing, where we're very angry and hurt, where we blame and hate. And we can stay stuck in this particular stage for a really long time and not even be aware of it, that this subject is consuming us. We are still making it all about the narcissist. Our life orbits around the exhausting subject of narcissism. We often overconsume indiscriminate content in an attempt to clarify the chronic confusion that had engrossed our life. There are many things that we continue to learn the hard way. In this initial stage, we are relieved that finally we found an answer that makes sense. And we want to share the impact of what this has had on our life. And people often find us overwhelming, and we may not see this at the time. For example, looking back now, I can see how me being consumed by this subject pushed away friendships and caused people to move away from me. I so desperately wanted people to understand. So the initial stages can feel very lonely. And nobody will tell you that there is a time and place to share those details. So being stuck in this initial stage can have a huge impact on our ability to attract good things into our life, because we're dwelling on the bad things for too long. And I'm not the person to tell you what the appropriate time is. All I want to do is bring this to your awareness, and perhaps you could notice if this is happening in your life, because healing is about us. And because other people won't tell you things directly, they'll communicate things to you indirectly. Basically, by us becoming so consumed in this subject of narcissism, we push people away. And allow me to offer you a reference here. Some people can remain stuck in stage 1 and move no further than stage 2 or 3 for 10 or 20 years. And I think you'd agree that that defines being stuck, because it just causes ongoing and unnecessary suffering. There are people reliving the trauma of a narcissistic relationship, which may have physically ended 10 years ago, yet mentally and emotionally, they are still there as if it were yesterday. And I used to observe this, and I still do, and I couldn't help but wonder, what is it about those people who seem to heal faster? What is it about the pace or the depth of certain therapies that is able to affect someone positively? How can I be more like a person that I admired who has survived and is now thriving despite some awful traumas? In these initial stages, it is all other focused, meaning it is all about them. And this becomes very disempowering, because I'm sure you know, trying to change them is futile. In these earlier stages, it is also when we still believe we can change them. After the shock wears off a little bit, we may enter denial, and we may want to learn special techniques, how to understand them better, how to talk with them, how to reason, to maybe get through. So all this time that we dedicate to understanding them, we continue to abandon ourselves and don't yet begin the journey of finding out who we actually are, besides the only identity that we had with the narcissist. There's nothing more that the narcissist loves than your attention. So there must come a point where you have to stop giving them what they want. We end up contaminating the potential of other new healthy relationships whenever we unnecessarily refer back to them and the trauma that we experienced at their hands. Every thought, every emotion continues to keep us bonded to them. And that's why we need to become responsible for how much time and attention we continue to give them. And that refers to your attention emotionally, mentally, and psychically. When we are boundaryless, narcissism is like a chaotic vortex that pulls us every which way. And it takes some time for us to realize that we have the power to create heaven or continue to create hell in our own minds. But we don't make these realizations in the early stages of healing. These thoughts don't come to our awareness until the much later stages, and often when we're utterly exhausted by thinking about them, by repeating our own story, and focusing on the topic of narcissism becomes a palpable experience. We just start to feel drained and repelled by the subject. So I'm just summarizing this for you, so hopefully you don't have to go through all these stages unnecessarily or for too long. And I just feel like I need to mention that even the topic of healing itself can become quite exhaustive. Focusing all our energy and attention on healing and the journey, and one day getting there, one day being good enough. Self-compassion is completely foreign to us, so that pattern of beating ourselves down rears its ugly head. If just for a moment you could see this as an opportunity for pattern recognition, that will be really helpful. For example, in this instance, externally, the narcissist nitpicked everything. And then that pattern continues within ourselves when we continue to find faults with ourselves. So in the initial stages, this pattern of fault finding can really cause us to get down on ourselves, on our life and the entire circumstance. So it's a variation of a lack program. I'm not good enough, you're not good enough. And gaining the ability to perceive these patterns will help us to depersonalize the issue, which is a really healthy step, which is virtually impossible at this initial stage, but I'm just putting it out there. So if you're in the later stages of healing, you can now look back and see that. This person whom you've identified as the narcissist, this relationship that you're in, these patterns of abuse, they all represent something. There is a greater meaning. There is a much bigger picture, which in these initial stages, you probably won't be interested in or you won't even recognize. But as you continue, you'll be able to see these patterns on a grander scale. So in effect, what we are actually doing when we're healing from narcissistic abuse, our healing and understanding and resolution of these patterns has an impact on an entire field of unconsciousness. It's like we unplug from it. But that initial stage is so intense, so painful and humiliating that oftentimes we try and convince ourselves that we can just get over it, sweep that immense hurt under the rug and get on with our lives. And sometimes we might have to do that temporarily for the sake of the children, for example. We may have to shelve that rawness until a more appropriate time. And that's okay as long as we're aware that we're doing it. So it's not denial, but rather wisdom and restraint. When we're at this stage, we often misinterpret healing to mean, look at all the things that are wrong with us. Look at all the things that we need to fix. And it can become so burdensome. And the supposed journey to qualify for us to get there sometimes appears impossible. See, nobody talks about the details of what it's like, and it can be extremely torturous and lonely because we feel unseen, and so few people understand. There are numerous patterns that can consume all our energy and attention. In this initial stage, it is often difficult to take any feedback because we are very fragile and we can become quite defensive, and understandably so. We have been hurt, betrayed, and harmed over and over again, so we are in a very delicate stage. The initial stage is the most painful, and it can last for the longest time out of all the stages, because often what we've discovered is so shocking and so emotionally overwhelming that we find it difficult to process all of this information and how to rebuild our life from this. What's required is extreme self-care, kindness and tenderness, but how can we extend that to ourselves when we've probably experienced so little of that? How could we possibly know when we are indulging in endless discussions about our pain, comparing and analysing the details of the abuse, repeating, replaying all the awful scenarios, and re-traumatising ourselves? How could we possibly know to set limits on that? That dialoguing all of those details could still be a form of self-harm. There's a part of us that's the inner child that's been deeply wounded, that feels completely abandoned. And there's another part of us that we need to develop, which is the loving inner adult that must become our own parental figure, that says, what can I do to make you feel safe? That says, that's enough, sweetheart, let's go and have some fun now. And that also says, I'm here for you and I love you. You see, there are many parts of us and there are many roles that we play. And you may not know the importance of this realization. There are aspects of you that you're not yet familiar with. But what I want to leave you with is there is also a part of us that is already healed, whole, and perfect. So my goal is to teach these masterclasses and make more videos with that in mind, speaking to and trying to reach that infinite you that already knows this stuff, that is calling you to step forward into even more courage, trust, empowerment. So I want to leave you with, can you feel within your heart a part of you, even if it's just a glimmer? Are you able to feel and connect with that part of you that's never been hurt, harmed, or broken? When we're able to connect to that energy and amplify those feelings within our heart that feel the truth of that, the truth of who we are, This is where healing begins, because it's a much more powerful place than when we focus on the part of us that's been harmed and victimized.